This episode of After Skool was written and narrated by Robert Pantano, the creator of Pursuit of Wonder. At some point in your life, you had your very first thought. Perhaps it was a visual, perhaps it was an intuition, perhaps it was a word or a crudely held together string of words. Whatever you might qualify as a thought, and whatever yours was, there was a first one. Being your first thought, however, it didn't really come from you, but more from what you were made of and had interacted with. Since there wasn't really a you as a formed self yet, you can't take credit for it. Though, for the most part, we do. Starting from that first thought, continuing on into an unbroken succession of thinking, we come to see all our thoughts as us. We see them as the integral mechanics of who we are, our understanding of the world, and how we can deal with and improve our experience in life. And in many ways, they are. And yet, we never chose the first one, never started the sequence, and never had a say in how our thoughts form. Though taking all our thoughts seriously and attaching our sense of self to them is understandable, perhaps it is somewhat misguided. Perhaps rather than providing clarity, this often creates confusion. Rather than contributing to the resolution of suffering, it exacerbates it. We often feel as though we are carrying our thoughts, but fundamentally, we are more so carried by them. In the words of Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung, the psychological rule says that when an inner situation is not made conscious, it happens outside as fate. That is to say, when the individual remains undivided and does not become conscious of his inner opposite, the world must perforce act out the conflict and be torn into opposing halves. For Jung, there is a constant interplay between the conscious and unconscious realms of the psyche, which together create our whole authentic self. Much of our psychological activity, however, develops and exists in the unconscious realm. As a result, even at just this level, much of what we think is the product of a realm we don't fully understand, have clear access to, or control, at least not by default. Like our first thought, all our thoughts have really just continued to appear in our consciousness through an interplay with forces beyond it. Not just the unconscious realm, but everything we interact with. There was no moment when we could cleanly stop the interactions between our unconscious mind, our body, and the external world, and intercept everything in a vacuum of conscious control. Thus, the string of our thoughts not only goes backwards, unbroken in time, but it also frays deep beneath the surface of our awareness and control. This is why blindly trusting and attaching ourselves to our thoughts can become a source of confusion and suffering. Our brain and body evolved for survival and continuation, not conceptual accuracy, not quality of experience. Thoughts are thus always being created and directed inside us for reasons that may or may not be trustworthy and may or may not serve the quality of our experience. We are more passengers to ourselves than we like to admit. Going beyond the mere dichotomy of the conscious and unconscious mind, what we really seem to be, what we really seem to experience, is a kind of awareness of the whole. We are not our thoughts, but we are not the observer either. We are sort of both and neither, the sum total of everything. Jung might consider this in terms of the integration of the entire system of the psyche, what he referred to as individuation, but we might consider deviating here towards something more along the lines of a kind of detachment from the system. Looking to schools of thought like Zen Buddhism and Taoism, these philosophies suggest that we find clarity and wholeness through non-rigidity and non-attachment to thoughts and our sense of self. The true self is merely awareness. When referencing the Tao or the Way, which in Taoism is the underlying natural order of all things, Lao Tzu writes in the Tao Te Ching, "Those who seek knowledge collect something every day. Those who seek the way let go of something every day." This distinction isn't trivial. It's more than just an intriguing framework for conscious experience. It can also be profoundly alleviating. Naturally and understandably, we tend to see our thoughts as reasonably accurate reads of ourselves, the world, and reality. As thinking beings, we come to worship them. And in some sense, our thoughts come to worship us back. It's a kind of parasitic relationship in which our thoughts feed on our awareness, and our awareness becomes filled up by our thoughts. In this, our awareness and our thoughts become entwined and snarled. In the words of Alan Watts, "Thinking is talking to yourself. If I talk all the time, I don't hear what anyone else has to say. Consequently, if I talk to myself all the time, I don't have anything to think about except thoughts. There's no interval between thoughts during which I can come into touch with reality. That is to say, the world which thoughts represent." Arguably, it is not our thinking that causes our suffering, but how our awareness becomes susceptible, entwined, and attached to our thoughts. We are all built by an evolutionary system that rewards survival and continuance in a world that appears chaotic and gruesome in relation to individual beings. Our thoughts illuminate this, our expressions of this. And so, by identifying with our thoughts, our awareness can become entwined and snarled with a kind of chaos and gruesomeness. Our anxieties, our fears, our overthinking, our unnecessary suffering, these are the products of thoughts fighting thoughts in a futile battle inside our head. And our awareness suffers from all the explosion of debris if we place it too on the battlefield. Conventional advice often suggests that we should think different thoughts, that we should change our mindset. This isn't totally wrong, but it's perhaps a bit misleading and incomplete. It's not enough to think differently. Thoughts can't solve the problems of thinking because they are what are causing the problems to begin with. We must therefore view thinking itself differently. We must have a different relationship with thoughts, operating with a kind of distrust toward them. We're not striving for meditative thoughtlessness here. We are not trying to rid ourselves of thoughts or even engage with thoughts less. Rather, we are trying to understand that there's a space between our thoughts and us, between thoughts and reality. Awareness. Watts put it like this: it doesn't mean not to have any thoughts at all. It means not to be fooled by thoughts, not to be hypnotized by the forms of speech and images that we have for the world, not to be hypnotized by them into thinking that that is the way the world really is. Since thoughts are sort of all we know, we feel as though they are real, solid objects in the world. They are, of course, real in the subjective, experiential sense, but they're mere cognitive impressions. They are not truth. They are not universal insights into us or reality. They only mean what meaning we give them. They're only as heavy as we weight them. Perhaps a useful, tangible framing is the following. We should consider thoughts with a degree of detachment, as if they were the thoughts of another person, perhaps a pestering but insightful child. When we consider our thoughts like this, when we see them as almost the thoughts of another, they suddenly become interesting, worth taking into consideration, worth engaging with, worth appreciating as wondrous displays of consciousness. But they no longer show up as fact, nor truth, nor wholly us. We observe them change and oscillate, while our awareness remains open and still. Suffering, even if just in the little moments when we can do this, alleviates. If this video resonated with you, my new book, The Terrible Paradox of Self-Awareness, explores many of these same ideas. It's a kind of philosophical thought map of awareness, overthinking, anxiety, suffering, and what it means to live as a conscious being in a chaotic world. Rather than avoiding or sugarcoating our condition, this book attempts to confront it directly, so we can better understand ourselves and transform self-awareness from a source of suffering into a source of wonder and poise. You can find the link in the description below.